You've tried to build discipline before, but every time life hits, your routines collapse. You plan your days, you set goals, but one distraction or one wave of fatigue is enough to break everything apart. And each failure leaves you with the same bitter thought. Maybe you're not strong enough. Here's the truth Musashi revealed. Strength is not built by chasing motivation. It is built by following a way so clear that nothing can shake it. In the Book of Five Rings, he left a complete system forged in duels, silence, and decades of relentless practice. Not a theory, but a method that made his discipline unbreakable. What if you could apply these same principles today? To silence excuses, to conquer distraction, and to hold routine that no storm could destroy. Each of Musashi's rings holds a principle, and together they form a method that transforms ordinary effort into unstoppable discipline. In this journey, you'll learn how to see the brutal truth of your habits, how to adapt when reality breaks your plans, how to turn anger into fuel, how to remain humble even when you succeed, and how to live in discipline so deeply that it becomes your second nature. The Earth Ring, facing the brutal truth. Musashi begins with Earth because the ground represents reality. Discipline cannot grow in illusions. He forces you to face the truth of where you actually stand, not where you imagine yourself to be. Most people claim they are busy, strong, or disciplined, but their days are filled with distraction, wasted hours, and empty effort. Earth exposes this gap between belief and reality. To Musashi, brutal self-assessment was the first battle. After his famous duel with Sasaki Kojiro, he didn't celebrate victory. He disappeared into a cave for 2 years to study why he had almost lost. He didn't let success blind him. He forced himself to see the cracks in his skill, the weaknesses in his preparation. That is Earth, not pride, not excuses, only truth. In your life, Earth means tracking your actions with ruthless honesty. How many hours are lost in mindless scrolling? How often do you abandon a commitment the moment discomfort appears? Until you measure and confront these truths, you will continue lying to yourself. Discipline cannot survive on self-deception. Earth also demands humility. You must admit that you are weaker than you pretend to be, that your distractions control you more than you admit. This humility feels humiliating at first, but it is a foundation for real growth. Just as a building collapses without solid ground, your routine collapses without truth. Musashi teaches that once you see reality clearly, you can never unsee it. The numbers, the habits, the wasted energy, they burn into your mind. And this pain is not your enemy. It is the key that unlocks the discipline to change. The Water Ring, adapting without breaking. Musashi chose water as the second element because water is both gentle and unstoppable. It adapts to every shape without losing its essence. This was his lesson. Rigid plans break, but adaptable discipline survives. Many people fail because they design perfect schedules, but the first disruption, an unexpected call, a sleepless night, a sudden crisis, destroys everything. Musashi never tied his strength to perfect conditions. In his early duels, he used whatever was at hand. Sword, spear, wooden stick, even his bare fists. Victory did not depend on tools, but on adaptability. That is the way of water. He flowed around obstacles rather than smashing into them. This flexibility made him impossible to predict and impossible to break. Your own discipline must follow the same principle. If you can only train at dawn, what happens when life keeps you up at night? If you can only focus in silence, what happens when chaos surrounds you? A routine that depends on perfection is already weak. Water teaches you to bend without breaking, to adjust while keeping your essence intact. Adaptability does not mean softness. It means persistence disguised as flexibility. When the plan breaks, the practice continues. Maybe the time changes, maybe the environment shifts, but the act survives. This is what most people never learn. Discipline is not about force, but about resilience. When you embody water, discipline stops being fragile. The unexpected no longer ends your progress. It becomes part of your training. Like a river carving stone, your consistency remains, not by resisting reality, but by flowing through it. The Fire Ring, turning struggle into fuel. Fire is energy, expansion, and transformation. Musashi placed fire at the center of his method because every warrior eventually meets the flames of emotion, anger, frustration, jealousy, despair. Most people let these emotions consume them, destroying their focus. Musashi turned them into fuel. He did not fear the fire within, he directed it. As a child, he lost his father. The rage that could have broken him became the force that drove him to train 14 hours a day. Every swing of his wooden sword carried that fury, but instead of burning himself, he burned away his weakness. That is the essence of fire. Your emotions are not the enemy. Misused, they consume you. Controlled, they forge you. You have felt this fire too. The voice that tells you you're behind, the comparison to others, the disgust at your own laziness. Most people silence that voice or drown it in distraction. Musashi teaches the opposite. Listen but redirect. Do not let the fire attack you. Let it attack your mediocrity. Practically, this means turning criticism into action, turning envy into effort, turning frustration into intensity. Instead of saying, I am pathetic, you say, I refuse to remain pathetic. The same emotion shifts target. The fire that once consumed you now fuels your next step. This is why Musashi's discipline never collapsed. Fire made his training relentless. He refused to let emotions dictate whether he continued. Instead, he trained them to serve his purpose. When you master fire, every weakness becomes energy. Every failure becomes fuel. The wind ring, staying humble while winning. Wind represents movement, learning, and openness. Musashi used it to remind himself and his students that arrogance is the greatest enemy of discipline. After defeating every rival school in Japan, he could have declared himself the ultimate master. Instead, at 50 years old, undefeated in over 60 duels, he still wrote, I have not yet reached the way. That is the humility of wind. Why does arrogance destroy discipline? Because the moment you believe you have arrived, you stop sharpening the blade. You ease up, you relax, and your vigilance fades. Victory whispers lies. You've done enough. You can stop now. And that whisper is what destroys even the strongest routines. Musashi never listened. He remained a student until his last breath. This principle is crucial for your life. When your routine starts showing results, when you feel stronger, when others begin to admire your discipline, that is the moment of greatest danger. You think you no longer need to track your habits, no longer need to push as hard, no longer need to return when you fall. That is how strength dissolves into weakness. The wind ring trains you to stay humble even in success. It teaches you to remain curious, to keep learning, to expose yourself to challenges that reveal your hidden flaws. Just as Musashi studied other schools of strategy to uncover gaps in his own, you must constantly look for new ways to refine yourself. The secret is this: humility is not weakness. It is vigilance. It is the awareness that no matter how far you've come, the way continues. Wind clears arrogance from your path, leaving discipline sharp and alive. The void ring, discipline without end. The void is the most mysterious of Musashi's teachings. In the Book of Five Rings, he describes it as a place where nothing and everything exist at once. For discipline, the void means abandoning the illusion of an end. Most people treat discipline like a temporary bridge. I'll work hard until I reach comfort, then I can relax. Musashi shattered this illusion. There is no finish line. This truth frightens most people. The thought of practicing forever, of waking early forever, of facing weakness forever feels unbearable. That's why they quit. They were chasing a destination that never existed. Musashi embraced the void by accepting that the path itself was a life. Discipline was not a stage to endure. It was the way to live. When you stop asking, when will this get easier? Everything changes. The answer is, it won't. Life will not soften. You will grow stronger. That shift in perspective transforms routine into identity. What begins as effort becomes natural. What begins as struggle becomes flow. This is why Musashi trained even in old age, why he painted and wrote poetry with the same intensity as sword practice. Every act was discipline. Every breath was training. The void absorbed all separation between practice and life, between the warrior and the way. To apply this, you must stop searching for rest in the wrong places. Discipline is not something you escape from. It is something you embrace until it becomes part of your nature. That is when nothing can break you. Musashi's strength was not random. It was forged in repetition, in daily acts so ingrained that they became impossible to break. He understood that discipline is not about grand gestures, but about anchors, rituals that hold you steady no matter how violent the storm. Without anchors, your routine drifts, carried away by distraction and emotion. A ritual is different from a habit. Habits are often unconscious. Rituals are deliberate. Musashi practiced the same sword cut thousands of times, not because he needed to think about it, but because he wanted to carve it into his body and mind until it was inseparable from who he was. This is how actions become identity. You need anchors the same way. Choose simple, repeatable acts that remind you daily of your path. It might be the way you begin your morning, the way you prepare for work, or the way you close your day. These are not small routines. They are declarations of discipline, repeated until your mind no longer questions them. Anchors protect you from chaos. When stress rises, when doubt creeps in, when fatigue tempts you to quit, the ritual holds you. It doesn't rely on mood or motivation. It works because it has become part of your nature, as natural as breathing. That is why Musashi never strayed. His rituals carried him when his emotions failed. The danger is neglecting these anchors. Skip them once and you feel no difference. Skip them twice and cracks appear. Skip them longer and your foundation collapses. Discipline isn't lost in one dramatic moment. It fades quietly when rituals are abandoned. That's why Musashi insisted on constancy. Never stray from the way. Musashi often chose silence over noise, solitude over distraction. Many believe he withdrew to escape the world, but in truth, he withdrew to confront it more deeply. Silence was his forge, where discipline was sharpened without interference. In silence, there are no excuses, no applause, no distractions, only the raw weight of your own thoughts. Most people today cannot endure 5 minutes of true silence. They run from it with endless noise, music, notification, conversations, anything to avoid being left alone with themselves. But silence reveals the truth. How restless your mind is, how undisciplined your focus remains, how desperate you are for escape. Musashi faced this head-on until silence became his ally. Silence is not emptiness. It is space for transformation. In the absence of noise, you first feel discomfort, then clarity, then strength. That is why Musashi could remain calm in duels where death was only one strike away. He had already faced the chaos within himself and silenced it. You can forge the same weapon. Begin with minutes of silence each day, without devices, without escape. Treat this not as meditation, but as training when your mind fights back with restless thoughts. Stay. That is the moment your discipline is forged. The mind that endures silence cannot be broken by external noise. This is why silence is a weapon. It cuts through the lies you tell yourself, removes the excuses, and forces you to face the truth of who you are. In silence, weakness screams, and in silence, you learn to master it. Musashi taught that the warrior who neglects small matters will fail in great ones. Most people believe discipline is only tested in grand moments. The duel, the competition, the crisis. But Musashi saw the opposite. Discipline is not built in extraordinary events, but in the ordinary, the invisible, the daily details that most dismiss as unimportant. He treated every movement, from how he tied his sandals to how he sharpened his sword, as training. Nothing was casual. Every action carried weight, because he knew that how you do small things is exactly how you will do great things. To neglect the minor is to prepare for failure in the major. In your life, this principle is transformative. If you cut corners when no one is watching, how will you endure when the world tests you? If you surrender discipline in small choices, in food, in posture, in words, why expect strength in greater battles? Vigilance in small things is the hidden root of indestructible discipline. This vigilance is not obsession, but awareness. It is choosing to walk with intention, to treat even the smallest act as part of the way. Musashi's message is clear. If you cannot be trusted in the details, you cannot be trusted in the storms. Discipline is proven first in the unnoticed. Most fail here because they crave recognition. They want applause for big efforts, yet they ignore the quiet decisions that shape character. Musashi reminds us, the way is not about being seen. It is about being strong. Even in silence, even in the unnoticed moments that no one else will ever acknowledge. Musashi knew that even the strongest warrior stumbles. He never pretended otherwise. What set him apart was not perfection, but his ability to return instantly to the way. Most people quit when they break their routine once. They treat a single failure as proof they are weak, as a reason to abandon the path altogether. Musashi refused this illusion. He understood that discipline is not measured by how rarely you fall, but by how quickly you rise again. A missed ritual, a broken promise, a failed attempt, these are not the end. They are invitations to return. The true danger is not the stumble itself, but the spiral of guilt and delay that follows. This is what makes the return protocol so powerful. The moment you fail, you return. Not tomorrow, not next week, not after guilt has eaten you alive. Immediately, the act of returning erases the failure and restores your strength. Discipline is not destroyed by falling. It is destroyed by refusing to rise. Most people feed weakness by dramatizing mistakes. They spend days telling themselves they have ruined everything, so they abandon the path. Musashi's way was simple. No excuses, no self-pity, no delay. Break once, return instantly. The path is still here. It never disappeared. When you live this way, your routine becomes unbreakable because it no longer depends on perfection. It depends only on persistence. The return protocol ensures that discipline survives storms, setbacks, and failures because nothing has the power to keep you away for long. At the end of his life, Musashi wrote 4 words that summarize everything. Never stray from the way. This was not just advice. It was a revelation that true discipline is not something you do, but something you become. Until then, you are borrowing strength. Only when the way fuses with your identity does discipline become unbreakable. When discipline is external, you negotiate with it. You ask yourself if you feel like it, if the conditions are right, if you have enough motivation. But when discipline is identity, there is no negotiation. You don't ask yourself whether to act. You simply act because it is who you are. Musashi no longer trained because he had to. He trained because he was training itself. This is the highest level of discipline. It is when your routines no longer feel separate from you, when they are as natural as breathing. Every act, every choice, every detail reflects the way. This is why Musashi could remain unshaken through victories, defeats, aging, and solitude. His discipline was not fragile. It was his essence. To reach this point, you must see discipline not as a task, but as a way of life. Stop separating your training from your living. Stop waiting for an end. Accept that every day, until your last, is the way. This acceptance is not a burden. It is liberation, because now you are free from the endless cycle of quitting and restarting. When discipline becomes identity, nothing can take it from you. You are no longer someone practicing discipline. You are discipline itself. And that is what makes you indestructible. So now you've seen the 5 rings of Musashi's method and the hidden principles that make discipline unbreakable. Earth teaches you to face truth. Water shows you how to adapt. Fire turns emotion into fuel. Wind keeps you humble in victory. Void makes the way eternal. Together, they form a shield stronger than any distraction, criticism, or failure. But here is the secret Musashi left as his final teaching. You don't wait for strength to arrive. You become it through action. The mind that faces reality, adapts to change, directs its fire, stays humble, and accepts the eternal struggle cannot be broken. It doesn't depend on mood or motivation. It simply continues. And because you stayed until the end, here is the bonus teaching Musashi lived by. Do nothing that is of no use. If you cut away what weakens you, the wasted hours, the empty distractions, the needless words, you'll discover that you already hold more strength than you imagined. Your discipline is waiting beneath the noise. Remove what is useless, and the way will reveal itself.